Good evening. Happy Friday. So I just want to thank everybody for joining the conversation tonight. It's another Friday, and I believe this might be week 9 or week 10. I need to go back and count. I think it might be week 10. And so along this COVID journey, we've been having these weekly conversations with faith and community leaders, and each of them have grown and been different than the one before. And so today's conversation is going to be a little bit different because my usual format is to interview 2 to 3 folks individually. But this conversation today around Jesus and justice, I felt it was really powerful to have a few voices all in at the same time, because I think we can all have a really powerful conversation together, glean from each other, and then also set the tone with the conversation with Reverend Dr. Amos Brown. My name is Denisha DeLane. I'm the founder of Faith in the Bay. And Faith in the Bay exists because for me, there was always a need to talk about Jesus and justice. Here I was, a young person in the Bay Area, rooted in church, raised in church, in a Baptist church in Berkeley, and had all of these other pieces of my life going on where I was involved in justice and community work, and I was deeply involved in the local gospel community, but I needed something that tied it all together. And so Faith in the Bay is what ended up coming out of that, because I had a huge need and began to continue meeting other people who had the same need. So I thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll enjoy this conversation. My first guest is Reverend Dr. Amos Brown. Like I said, growing up as a young person in the East Bay, who didn't know Reverend Dr. Amos Brown? He was our bright shining light in the Bay Area, and sitting in San Francisco, supporting everyone. And so when you think of justice and when you think of folks who are visionary doing the work, Reverend Brown has always been there. I had the privilege of having an up close view working with the NAACP and serving along with him as a member of the National Board of Directors for the NAACP. And some of those years for me as a young person, when I still had teen in my age, Reverend Brown made himself accessible. When I was a member of the National Youth Work Committee, Reverend Brown shared with us his experience as a member of the National Youth Work Committee as a young person. And that kind of access to someone who has wisdom, who sat at the feet of folks that we read books about, is rare. And so he's a rare gem. I want to bring him on so we can have that conversation and then go into a deeper conversation a little bit later. So my first guest tonight is Reverend Dr. Amos Cleophas Brown.
You got it right.
Yes. I will never get your middle name wrong. I think that was just something I came to love the C in your name. How you doing, Reverend Brown?
Well, let me tell you what that name means. It's from the Greek Cleo, meaning people, and Ophelos, lover of people. That's what my middle name means. My first name, Amos, my Sunday school teacher taught me, means the prophet who bears the burdens.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she told me that in the 8th grade. Well, when I was 8 years old, Sunday school. I never forgot what she said. And she said, you're going to be a prophet who will speak for your people.
That's right.
I was 8 years old, and I never forgot it.
Well, you know what really made me remember your name, your middle name, your full name, is because for years I loved the interaction between you and another person who had a middle name with a C, Julius Caesar Hope. And so when you all would see each other and greet each other, you'd call each other by your full name. And that made me laugh. And I will never forget either of your middle names. I miss him dearly. He was a good person.
I miss him too.
Yes.
By the way, he pastored in Brunswick, Georgia. First pastor, where unfortunately our young brother was gunned down by those 3 white men.
Yes.
A few days ago.
So Reverend Brown, set this in context for me. There's pastors, there's leaders, there's ministers all around the country trying to find a piece of hope and reassurance for their members and for themselves. These are difficult days. How do we still look for justice while also lifting up and sharing Jesus? How can we be reassured in doing this work?
Just follow Jesus. Unfortunately, too many of us have been seduced or conned to follow Pauline, institutionalized, Romanized, oppressive Christianity. That same brand of Christianity that justified the enslavement of our ancestors. If our members of the listening viewing audience ever have the chance to make enough money, they need to go to Ghana, West Africa, and see Cape Coast Castle, where our ancestors were stacked in these dungeons, waiting to go on that unknown voyage across that Atlantic Passage for 4 to 5 months, and stacked in those slave ships like sardines in cans. But before they left Cape Coast Castle and those dungeons, they had to be faced with the hypocrisy of the Anglican Church. For on the very top level of that church is an ornate chapel, and there was a surveillance door from the chapel in order that those enslavers would be able to monitor the behavior of our ancestors. And if anyone got out of line or resisted, they were thrown into the deepest dungeon to break their spirit. That's what Christianity did. And then after they brought us here against our will, the Society for the Propagation of the Faith promoted the nonsense that we did not even have souls. And that's why they were further able to rationalize slavery.
Wow.
By saying we didn't have any humanity in us. We were just tools to be vast cogs in the plantation machinery, to make cotton king and to build the economy of this country. That's a fact. And that's why, fast forward, here we are in 2020 in great anger over what happened in Minneapolis this week. Why did it happen? Because that very police officer who was there holding down Brother George Floyd did not view Brother George as being human. He put his hands in his pocket and put his knee on his neck. And you could see the expression on his face. I'm going to kill you, whether you want to breathe or not. So that's essentially what Christianity represents. But Jesus of Nazareth was about, according to Luke 4, bringing good news to the poor, setting the captives free, enabling the lame to walk, the deaf to hear, and proclaiming the acceptable year of the Lord. What was that? A change in the economic system so that the least of those would be able to receive some of the accoutrements of living, like 3 square meals, house to live in, health care, and all those goodies that other folks get.
Well, Reverend Brown, whenever you speak, I'm all ears, and I'm sitting here right now with my cell phone because I have one final question for you. I think a lot of young people who might tune in later, others who might watch this, young clergy, what would you encourage them to be reading right now? Every time I see you, you're talking about a new book or something that you have pulled from the Constitution or something that's in the halls of Congress. Drop some knowledge on us and tell us what should we be reading.
The first book that all of us should be reading in this country is Andrew Delbanco, Delbanco. It's a book. What's the title of that book? The Death of Satan. And in that book, he deals with how America has been living in fantasy land about this nation being a Christian nation, and documenting how we never had a consciousness of evil. That's the reason why we were enslaved as Blacks. That's the reason why there were witch hunts at Salem. That's the reason why that lie was told about George Washington, I'm not telling a lie, chopping down the cherry tree. That's the reason why women couldn't have the right to vote. Because we lived in a fantasy land that was created by people who were interested not in spirituality or God when they came here. Those Puritans were interested in money, in power, in conquest. And it was only just a handful who were really following Jesus. The other thing that Delbanco lifts up in this book is where this xenophobic nonsense comes from. Why in 1891, right down here, 30 miles from San Francisco, at Stanford University, a man named Ross, who's one of the fathers, Edward Ross, one of the fathers of sociology. And you know what he did in 1891? And he almost lost his job for doing this at Stanford. He coined the phrase racial suicide and said that if white women didn't have more babies, and particularly 4 to 5 babies, the black, the yellow, and the brown races would outnumber them, and they would commit
Racial suicide. Wow.
And also, in 1884, the Democratic National Convention had as one of its planks in its platform the encouragement of white women to have more babies. Can you future that? Can you see that? Way back there, this was going on. Come fast forward again to the times of Theodore Roosevelt, Mr. Environmentalist, supposedly. You know what he said in a paper entitled True Americanism? He said if white women didn't have more children, they should be considered criminals.
Wow.
So you see, all this stuff about keeping those terrorists out is nonsense. It's a smokescreen. It's a game. It's a number. All this stuff that they're jumping up down talking about not supporting abortion, it has nothing to do with reverence for life. For if they really revered life, they would not be supporting capital punishment and with the drop of a hat.
They'd be supporting the whole life.
Whole life.
The whole life.
So we are beset today with Donald Trump's nonsense about keeping people out. Those people south of the border. Those people from Latin America. Those people from the Middle East. He's not concerned about keeping those terrorists out. If he were, he would have known a long time ago that we had a terrorist right here in America. McVeigh killed all those people in Oklahoma City.
Right.
Ku Klux Klan represented terrorism. When those 4 little girls were bombed to death at 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, that was terror. And by the way, do you know that Thomas Dixon, I'll jump into another book, Thomas Dixon wrote a little novel, The Klansman, in 1915. And what was it about? Extolling the virtues of the Ku Klux Klan in order that the black vote would be suppressed during Reconstruction. Just think about it.
That's all good stuff. Reverend Brown, I can always count on you to keep us informed, to keep us educated, and to keep us on our toes.
I got 2 more.
You got 2 more? Okay, 2 more.
Another book, The End of White Christian America.
Yes.
By Robert Jones.
And
he very well delineates and documents how this thing called Christianity in America is on its way out. And even the young whites are not even following churches anymore because they see all this hypocrisy in the white evangelicals who haven't said one word about Brother George.
Not a one. Not a one word.
You haven't heard a word from Franklin Graham, Jerry Falwell Jr., Paula White, Robert Jeffers, and you haven't heard one word either from Rick.
All right, Reverend Brown, final book.
And the other book is The Power Worshippers, Inside the Dangerous Rise of Religious Nationalism by Catherine Stewart. You see, these religious right people are following Donald Trump's crazy brand of nationalism.
Yeah.
And not seeing that the world is a global village. So that would be something that I would suggest that they read these books. Del Banco's book, The Death of Satan. They can get it on Amazon. Read also about Thomas Dixon, who inspired the founding of the Ku Klux Klan. And by the way, let me say parenthetically, after he wrote that work, he was invited by scholars all across the country. And even Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States, had the gall to show that film that D.W. Griffith did, Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation.
Which also extolled the virtues of the Ku Klux Klan. And remember, The End of White Christianity by Robert Jones, and The Power Worshippers, Inside the Rise of the Religious Nationalism in America.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Brown. I appreciate you for taking time out to talk with me. I think everyone should have the opportunity to sit at your feet and get some wisdom. I love that you are always sharing and you are trying to plant seeds along the way as you go. This won't be our last conversation. I'm looking forward to having you back on again in the future. And I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you very much. Let me tell you this, though. On Monday at 11 o'clock, Jamie Foxx
yes.
will be here. We're going to have a big rally at the Hall of Justice, 850 Bryant. to let our voices be heard in a prophetic, peaceful way about the lynching of George Floyd.
I will be there with you, Reverend Brown.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So you just heard it. Don't miss Monday in San Francisco. Stay tuned for more information. I'll make sure I have that info posted on the Faith in the Bay website. And so that's just new information that I wasn't even aware of, but very exciting. There will be a conversation and a movement in Monday with a special guest. And this will be a San Francisco rally for speaking out against Mr. Floyd, Mr. George Floyd, who everybody has seen the video by now. Many of us believe that he was murdered. Unfortunately, people in the state and in position of power think that they still need to do some additional investigation, but maybe they saw more camera angles that we didn't see. We've now seen 2, maybe 3 camera angles, but maybe they have another camera angle that the rest of us have not seen yet. So now I'm excited to bring on the rest of my guests so that we can have this additional conversation on Jesus and justice. I thought it was very important to set the foundation and have a conversation with Reverend Brown, because when he puts some things into context, it starts to get all these wheels going. So I'm really excited about all of our guests that are on today, and it'll be a part of this conversation. So just as they start coming in, definitely in the comment section, share some things in there, raise your questions in there. We're going to be having a fluid conversation. I think each of them are powerful in their own right in terms of how they use their access and their influence to leverage structure and power on behalf of the community. Each of them are doing amazing work and doing the most for the least of these. And so I think you'll be inspired by this conversation, but I definitely want to encourage everyone to jump into the comment section, leave a message, leave a comment, and we'll try to answer those questions, and I'll try to get those in if we can. So I'm just going to start bringing folks on, get you in here. Hey, Pastor Porter. Hey. Hi, Pastor Hopkins. Let me see. I've got some more down in here. Here we go. Pastor Dante Quick. And here we go, Reverend Don Abbott. How's it going, everyone?
Good, how are you?
Thank each of you for taking the time to be available for this conversation. We are in trying times, and I know it's very hard on everyone because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of conversation, and there's a lot of movement happening all around us. So why don't we go through? I want each of you to introduce yourselves. I could, but I'll be long-winded. So how about each of you introduce yourselves, the congregations that you're serving, and where your ministry is located. Let's start to my right. It looks like it's to my right on the screen. So we'll start with you, Pastor Porter.
Well, hello, everyone. And thank you, Denisha, for allowing me to come and be a part of this and to follow the great Pastor Amos Brown. My goodness. My name is Dr. Tecoy Porter. I pastor the Genesis Church in Sacramento, California. And I'm also the president of the National Action Network, Sacramento chapter, and the newly formed California State chapter, I guess, of the National Action Network.
Nice. State chapter. That's new news.
Yeah.
Very good. Pastor Jim.
Hey, Denisha, good evening. In respect to my esteemed colleagues, it's good to walk the road with you and all. Wow, what an honor to follow Dr. Brown. Pastor Jim Hopkins, Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church in Oakland, corner of Lakeshore and Mandana. And some of my other major commitments in the community is I'm co-chair of the board of Faith in Action East Bay, formerly CO, vice president of the board of the Interfaith Council of Alameda County. And square peg round hole responsibility is I'm the president of the Lakeshore Avenue Business Improvement District.
Woo, now that's serious business. Very cool. My fellow sister holding it down, Reverend Donna. Let's see, it looks like you might be muted. Hold on.
Yes.
Let's try now.
I'm gonna. Okay.
Uh-oh, you muted yourself.
I'm having a hard time hearing, so I'm going to bounce out and come back. But I'm Reverend Donna Allen, the pastor of New Revelation Community Church. We have a location in Oakland, California, and in Vallejo, California. And I'm going to bounce out and come back, and I think that might clear up my connection. I have a lot of static.
Okay. Hey, my brother in Vallejo.
Yes, Reverend Dante Quick. I'm here in Vallejo, California. I'm the pastor of Friendship Missionary Baptist Church here in Vallejo. We also have a corollary organization, New Dawn Vallejo, which is a community development corporation that does a variety of things around the city. And apart from the church, I'm also the president of the Community Democratic Club, which is the African American Democratic Club established here in Vallejo to help create structural change, not only in Solano County, but in our party.
Nice. Well, again, thank each of you for being here. The purpose, obviously, is to talk about what's happening, but also to really to reassure each other, because I think everyone is having this, not the same frustration, but there's a level of frustration that it's obvious that each of us would have. We are human, and the human side of us is hurting in general, not just because of what happened this week, but what's been happening repeatedly over and over and over. And so I think one of the questions that comes up a lot within the church is, how long and how much can we bear? And so for each of you working in ministry and community, how has it been, the challenge of trying to reassure your congregation and members of your congregation who feel like they're at their wits' end on this?
Wow. Yeah.
That's anyone can jump in. I
hear from so many folks that they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And how long, oh Lord? It's just stunning that here we are, that the history repeats itself and revisits itself, and the pain, instead of going away, seems to be just multiplied. And I guess if there's a quote, it's not from the Bible, but it's James Baldwin. He says that not everything, what does he say, is that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. And that's one of the quotes that keeps me going.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think in terms of the challenge to motivate and inspire our congregation, that's secondary to the challenge of trying to keep ourselves as pastors and leaders motivated and inspired in this day and age. You have the uncertainty piled upon uncertainty, in regards to the COVID situation. Well, let's go back to pre-COVID. Pre-COVID wasn't all that great. Post, and then now you into the COVID situation, being sheltered in place and quarantined. And now we're finding ourselves dealing with slaying of our brothers and sisters, happening by police and racist people. And then again, you have still in the midst of all of this. And I think what we have to preach here is the most certain thing that we do have is God, is our faith in Christ, and knowing that He is with us in all of this. And just remembering that helps to keep me. And that's why I preach, it looks like every Sunday, how God is faithful, even in the midst of all of this.
So there's this repeated conversation about, you know, for folks that are in community and are marching in the streets, as if there's this division that there is no justice in Jesus, or that Jesus cannot be found in justice. And I get that my upbringing was not everyone else's upbringing, but for many of you that are doing the work in community, how do you remind the community with not just your physical presence, but as we peel back the layers of some of our favorite text, right? We can find something all peppered throughout scripture. There's so many examples. And so how is it that this justice piece has somehow been removed or separated from Jesus and from the church? I guess what I'm saying is, many times people in church will say, that's not my thing. I don't vote. I'm not political. I'm just going to pray about it. But I think that each of you in your own very unique way say, wait a minute, we've got to put faith with our action. We've got to put, you know, our footwork and some sweat equity with our tears. And so how do we continue to lift that up and have that conversation with people who might be jaded and figure that there is no justice in Jesus and Jesus can't be found in justice?
Well, I would just suggest that we're starting at the wrong place. Our theology is truncated because we start and finish with Jesus. And the Bible doesn't start there. The Bible starts with the Ruach, the Spirit, that hovered over the formless void. And because we go straight to the Pauline Christ, which has in many ways always been co-opted in the West by patriarchal capitalism, we're only reading a portion of the Bible. And therefore, we can't engage people in the righteous anger of God, because we stay based in the nuanced grace of Christ. So one of the ways that I am ministering to the frustrations of my community is by giving them permission to acknowledge their frustrations. They're frustrated with a church that is inactive. They're frustrated with the white liberal who will love them as long as it doesn't make them uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
They're frustrated with an economic system that's left them out. They're frustrated with a church that's become more encompassed in buildings and in ministry. And so I think we've got to give our community the space to be frustrated and to be angry. And we can no longer start with Christ, because theology doesn't start with Christ. The Bible starts with the power of God, which is based in the Spirit. And because we are so fixated on the healing of Christ and the peace of Christ, we're not getting to the righteousness of Jehovah and Yahweh. We're not reading the prophets enough. And I would suggest to you, and I don't know how my fellow panelists feel about this, that because we have bought into the Western patriarchal Christianity, we're not talking about the God of Scripture. And even as Christ makes his earthly exit from the stage, as Jesus makes his earthly exit, he says, I commend to you the Paraclete. And so much of my work and the book I'm writing is based on the work of the Holy Spirit and the power of the Holy Spirit, and recapturing that. And how do we understand a powerless church that reads the Bible? Because that's in essence what we are right now, a powerless church. And how do we recapture that power?
Reverend Donna, I heard some movement going. So I know you have something to jump in and say.
I'm not so sure, but I'm grateful that I can hear you all now. I wasn't able to hear before. So a part of what Dr. Quick was sharing, I missed, but that tail end piece, it seems perfect for the setting of Pentecost and the good news about the power of the Holy Spirit and its transformative power in our lives. And so I don't know that I have much of a comment on that other than to co-sign. I agree with that power. I also hold a great hope in the power and the prophetic voice of the church. I know there are many ways in which that prophetic voice needs to be amplified, and that prophetic voice needs to bring with it a greater theological critique and engagement of what's going on in the world and what God has to say about what's going on in the world and our role in it. And I hold a great hope that we are part of what is going to help transform our world. We're not dead yet.
So obviously locally throughout California, there's been this argument of open, don't open, and then recently the directives were released from the governor's office on, okay, so you want to open, so this is what it's going to take to open. And so that list was awfully long, and I think people who expected to open this Sunday are sitting back and saying, well, we asked for this, and they're not even ready. So how are you adjusting in this new COVID season for what is going to be the long haul, right? What is the marathon that we're prepared to run on this? And how are you helping your congregants with their mental health and also stay connected, like that connectedness that we enjoy physically, but how are you helping them staying connected in this new virtual space? Y'all want me to start calling on you.
We're so kind. We're so kind to everybody.
Right, you're so kind. You're so kind.
We did not plan on coming in to the church in Vallejo. I have been arguing to our church that the church is in revival, that the gift of COVID-19 to the body of Christ is that God is calling. It is a gift, I think, in some ways. That God is calling us from religion to relationship. And we are now no longer have the crutch of pews and walls, that if you want to be in community, you have to make very conscious efforts. You have to call people and check in on people. You just can't lazily wait to see them on Sundays. And I am suggesting that as you see the church in revival, we are doing the same ministries we've done in church online. We're starting what we call curative conversations. We're bringing all of our members who are therapists and social workers, and we're starting small groups in which we can talk about our emotional issues. We're doing our D-Free online because I'm arguing as a church we need to leave with what I'm calling a pandemic plan. And that means I think this is the time for us to leave better financially. Black people, poor Black people don't care what the dollar is doing. That's not affecting us. The stock market going up and down isn't changing our lives in any way. So we've got to get out the psychology. And then we are talking about what it means to really be a church. And too many of us in the early 90s with the founding of the mega church identified it with the building. I think most churches have been closed for a long time. They just didn't know it. And we are actually receiving new members online. We have people who are joining church, coming to Christ. We're going to baptize them when we go back into the building. But I see COVID as God reclaiming sovereignty over pastors and choirs and churches.
Well, I'll jump on that one. I have to agree with my brother here, Pastor Quick, that COVID really is an opportunity. I think it was said that you never want to let a good crisis go to waste. And that's one thing that we cannot allow happen right now for the church. The Lord stopped the planet, I believe, to reset the church, to reset us so that we can get back to what we were supposed to be doing. I think we lost our way, following the prosperity gospel and thinking about me, my, and what we can do, the buildings that we can build, and how many you running, Doc. Now everybody's running nobody, Maybe we're looking at views now and counting those, but now we're all kind of just reset. We're back at the same space. There's no such thing as a mega ministry at this point, and so we're on an even playing field. And so now it's all about you and the word, what you present, how good your theology is, and it kind of tells you who the real servants are, the real preachers, the real folks that can get the word out there to the people. And then it forces us to connect on purpose with each other. And so now we have to be creative. We bring in creativity back into the church. And I'm not just talking about talent, because Black church has always strived on talent, but I'm talking about in relationship building and community building and really going the extra mile. How do we get over this obstacle of not being able to be there in person and still community? And so I'm actually, I'm not going to say enjoying it, but I am up for this challenge. And so is our church through our live streaming, and we too are launching an e-campus because now we understand, hey, we may never get back to running full services, at least in this year. And so we need to maybe have to have new member orientation, have our Bible studies and other study groups online and create that access. And also access not just for our location or geography, but then also beyond our four walls, beyond our state even, the nation. How do we bring in new members in that matter as well?
Sorry about that. Sorry for losing you for a second, but I'm glad you all kept the conversation going back. I was thinking about Pastor Jim because of your location around the lake. Did you already answer that question?
No.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, because your congregation is situated right next to Lake Merritt, right? And so people are hanging out, people are, they want to be outside, and they may or may not be practicing social distancing. Lakeshore Avenue has always been this very outdoor experience inside. And how has this adjustment been for your congregation?
Well, it's been a learning curve, and I appreciate the conversation, especially lifting up the crisis. And I was like Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust. He taught us that we don't get to choose our crises, but we choose our response to them. And so, that's one thing I've been trying to reiterate with our congregation, that we are in a crisis. And we are being defined by our response to this crisis, and making sure that we just don't look at our own well-being, but we pay attention to the well-being of the community, that we belong to Christ and to each other, but we belong to a circle of folks that we don't even see, that we'll probably never meet. So I'm really stressing, again, this is my friends have stressed, that sure, we'd like to get back together. But when you tell me about what you're missing about getting back together, the choir, the hugging, that's the stuff we're not going to be able to do for a long, long time. And so an act of caring, and really an act of justice, if you will, an act of passing the peace of Christ to our community, is staying home, wearing our masks, and making the best of what we can in a changed environment. And there's been some pluses for it. Well said, Dante and Dr. Porter. One of the pluses for me is we started a Monday night youth group, and I haven't been nearly in touch with our high school kids the way I should have, but be able to be on Zoom with them on Monday night and listen in on their struggles and their hopes, and always moved about the way they're concerned about their parents and grandparents and their family, not just themselves. They're concerned about their community. I've been inspired by seeing the world through the eyes of our seniors, some of the ones that are missing out on their graduations. But you know what? They see a much bigger picture. And so I don't know. I know I've been changed by that. I don't know if I've led any change, but I've been changed by seeing the world through the high school eyes.
Good. So now with all of this social unrest that's going on around the country, in response not just to what happened this week with George Floyd, but feeling like it's the final straw, and how many times have each of us been involved in year after year after year, feeling like this was the final straw. What is the role of the church in this current conversation and demonstrations? How can the church be influential? And what are we missing? Is it separate from just being in the streets? What is the other angle that many of us can play for those that are watching, for those that are feeling unsure? Now, I still feel like I got a little bit of fight in me. I put on my tennis shoes. I might be going outside tonight. But for those that may not be willing to do that, or don't express anger that way, what are the other solutions? What are the other strategy things that people and believers can really take up in this time? See, that's not my internet. That's y'all. That's not my internet.
We're getting ready to look at starting Freedom School, because I think part of the problem is we're reliving history like it's happening for the first time. Mm-hmm. And so we're engaging in the trauma each and every time as if it's new. And so that our victimization always feels fresh rather than consistent. And as such, we're always starting over emotionally, psychologically. We're always hitting bottoms when we've always been at the bottom. And so I'm amazed at how many of our young people and how many of our older people don't know who Emmett Till is. They can't follow this cycle. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the rage is new. And what I am suggesting is this is the perfect time for us to free the minds of people. Now we can engage scholars from anywhere. Dr. Allen and I have been teaching at the Allen Temple Institute. I've just introduced them to David Walker.
Wow.
David Walker was writing about this type of revolution in 1827, where he was challenging Thomas Jefferson's Notes from Virginia, like we should be challenging Donald Trump. This struggle is not new. It's just theologically, many of us have started our theological journey with James Cone, which is a tragedy. We need to be going back to Jarena Lee. We need to be going back to people who've been doing this work and have left us wisdom so that we don't always have to start over. So right. My hope is that by starting these freedom schools, and maybe we can do it on a larger scale, we can get people to help teach out of everyday conversations, Sula, Song of Solomon, Man, Child in the Promised Land. And the first thing that I'm going to use is Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Because much of what's happening here doesn't begin with the enslavement of white capitalism. It's self-enslavement we've got to break first. And I am frustrated because I've watched the protest, I get the protest, but let's not burn down buildings that our seniors need to eat.
Right.
Don't burn down our own, we're already in food deserts. And so let's not destroy the little we have. And guess what? The National Guard ain't letting us into Walnut Creek.
That's all right.
They're not letting us into places that they're going to really value. They're letting us burn down our own places. Mm-hmm. And from Oakland to everywhere else, we can draw a direct line of gentrification. Every time there's a major riot and burn down, guess who comes in and takes over those communities? And we can't even afford to live there anymore. So just educating us about the ramifications of what we're doing.
Reverend Donna, I want to bring you in here because I've noticed online that there's always in movement work, there's this back and forth of where's the guy that's going to, this is me going to the tough questions, okay? Y'all get ready, you get ready. But what do we do with gender balance, right? So here we are in 2020, our movement work in terms of our interfaith stuff, we're getting to a place where we see more interdenominational relationship and working things, but we still don't see enough women that are leading at the forefront or getting the credit that they deserve in movement work. But we see successful movements like Black Lives Matter and other things like that that have been successfully led by women. So how is it, this is my question directly to you, and then hopefully everybody else will chime in. How is it for you seeing the reaction of men because unfortunately, sadly, unjustly, George Floyd was murdered? But what about young women who continue to lose their lives in the safety of their homes by police who do not announce themselves and begin shooting before they even come in, right? And so why is it that there's this different reaction when it comes to women, but we're doing this pain Olympics between genders and we get different? It's not a balance in our community. How do you feel about that?
Well, I agree. There isn't a balance in particularly the media coverage of it. There is also not a balance in how our community responds to it. But if I sort of collude with Dr. Quick on this is not new, this is not new. The inability for our community to also see the simultaneous pain, horror, and trauma that women experience, and often the silence about it, is detrimental. So I am encouraged by movements that are led by women, but the conscious raising that is required to talk about the experiences of women, that for every man there is unfortunately also a woman, and that for every woman there is unfortunately a non-gender binary identifying person, and the list goes on. So absolutely. The isms that we face within the Black church and within our communities that exclude the representation of non-gender binary people and women are prevalent, both in the work, the revolution work, and they're prevalent in media presentations. And I don't know that I can respond to the question how I feel about it in a way that is helpful. I'm no longer shocked by it. I anticipate it. I'm not paralyzed by it, and continue to work for justice for all, because that's what I'm called to do, and that's the God that I serve, understanding that all of us as leaders are imperfect. But we have to continue having the critical, hard questions that you just raised in order to begin to change that. To change that reality, that bias, that limitation on our perspective of who is harmed and who the prophets are.
I'm noticing more coalition building around. You do not have to raise your hand, Pastor Jim. You're too kind. Go on, you jump in.
That's just to connect to something Donna said and Dante said early on. I mean, we are coming to Pentecost here, and the paraclete, the advocate, the comforter. Paraclete comes from a Greek word, para, alongside, and call. Call alongside. And on that first Pentecost, the proclamation was based from the book of Joel, the vision of Joel, where the Spirit would fall on men and women, young and old, slave and free. And then if you read the book of Acts, the mother of Jesus was Mary in that first inner circle. And it was very likely she was among the first proclaimers, the first preachers. This is nothing new. The Spirit falls, and it falls on men and women and those that with non-binary identification, but it falls in a way that we're only beginning to imagine. It's nothing new. Let it fall. Get out of the way.
I like that. If we get out the way, I like that part. Pastor Porter, you're doing some amazing work with National Action Network. Do you feel as if, and shout out to my old buddy, Nelson Rivers. Can't talk to Reverend Brown and not think about Nelson Rivers.
That's true.
My very first time marching in Atlanta, Georgia was with Nelson Rivers. Picked us up in a van, and we had hot water because it was hot and ice wasn't working. And I'm grateful for those years, and he's amazing in so many different ways. Yeah. But what would you say about diverse coalitions? It's a lot of non-traditional stuff that's happening. I think our young folks and these new movements that are being created are stretching us beyond what we've been very comfortable with as a community, especially as a community of faith. I've seen more marches that have the disabled community that are leading them, that have children I'm seeing the LGBT community represented, and it gives me a lot of hope. Where are we in terms of this coalition building work, in terms of building a national network? Is it enough for us to just say, carry my water, but I'm not concerned about yours?
Well, not at all. I think that we are learning from our millennials, our younger groups, generations. They are challenging us in our foundational thinking to broaden, ourselves. And I think that's exactly what we need. The National Action Network. One thing I appreciate about Reverend Al Sharpton and Pastor Rivers and those in our leadership is that we are saying we need everybody on the team. We need everybody on the team to get this job done. And if we're fighting for one person's rights, then we should fight for everybody's rights. And we lead with love. We lead with love. And it's in our mission, to fight for not only equality, but equity, equity for everyone. So that's generational. That's multicultural, and no matter what sexual orientation we have it, we just have to go at that. And you know what? I'm going to get on the bandwagon and say this is nothing new, in terms of the need for it in doing this. And I think we forgot about it. We forgot about the need to really stand up for our brother and sister, being our brother and sister's keeper in that. And I think as a church, we cannot be afraid to go beyond not only the walls of our church buildings, but the walls, the made-up walls that we have made up in our doctrines and all that, that this is not, God does not care about Kojic, Methodist, and what have you. Just the line goes on, denominations and other man-made rules that we have done. We're all God's children. We all deserve the right to live as God has created us and made us, and pursue that. And so I'm all for it. So if you down with helping people, I'm down with you, and we should work it out. And we have to be daring to go into areas that don't expect faith people to go into. So that education, that of politics, what do we do after we protest? We're looking at MSNBC and CNN, and we're seeing protests happening across our nation, Chicago, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, even here in Sacramento. They're marching over George Floyd's passing and all the other victims of police abuse and violence. And we have to, after you protest, what do? You got to get into the table, got to get into those rooms where they make decisions. We have to run for office. We have to run for our educational boards and county boards and all those districts and city councils. We have to get into that space if we're going to make a difference through our faith. We cannot contain our faith anymore just in our four walls.
Pastor Jim, how hard has it been, especially because of the national conversation that's happening? There's so much divide and so much conversation around racism. I want to just ask you directly, how do you meet the need of members who come to you privately? I've known you for quite a while, and I'm always in the background. My running joke is everybody doesn't have to know me. It's my job to know you. And so I have watched for some time and know that the struggles, especially in the neighborhood that you pastor, there's been gentrification. There's been a huge transformation of that neighborhood. That's the first community in Oakland I was actually raised in. Was right over there by 7th Avenue. And so, and I'm a Berkeley girl, but that's where I lived first. How hard has it been for you? And what is the struggle and the strain of trying to help and pastor folks that are really dealing with white guilt, with privilege, and trying to figure out how do I express myself and not get it wrong? Because that's a reality for folks. And so I just want to go right to you with that.
Well, thank you. And a lot of answers, but we are going to get it wrong, and we need to face it rather than solve it. And we need to understand the ways that we are have long been part of the problem. I mean, look, I'm a Baptist. Baptists talk about soul freedom, Bible freedom, religious freedom, soul freedom, church freedom. We talked about all kinds of freedom. And the fact is, while good white Baptists were talking about soul freedom, we were perfectly happy to have people of black skin be in physical bondage. And we have a long history of spiritualizing our faith, denying that Jesus stood for justice, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so, yeah, we need to start by owning our complicity and maybe just sit there for a while and take what we deserve. White fragility. Robin DiAngelo has written a book called White Fragility. And one of the things she'll say is that white people, when faced with the systemic racism, will try to say, well, not us, not us, not us. Like, racism isn't something we commit. Racism exists. It's in the water. It's in the air. It's in the system. And let's, instead of trying to deny that and say it's not us, it's not my fault, let's just own it. And if there's some stuff that comes our way by owning it, start there.
Yeah, acknowledge it, dismantle it, get it out the way. But we've got to see it, and we've got to acknowledge it.
I'm not sure. Yeah, we're not going to get out of the way. We got to know it is so deep. I mean, the violent policing. What is that a manifestation of? Desire to maintain white supremacy. We got to name that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Pastor Jim. Reverend Donna, I want to talk about mental health. You are one of our mental health sheroes and doing really powerful work, helping to train and develop the capacity of congregations to meet the need. When our congregations eventually open up, there's going to be a huge need for mental health resources. Even before we open up, is going to be a huge need for mental health resources. How can we go beyond our comfort zone and get comfortable with some new practices in terms of wellness beyond just we're going to read and we're going to close our eyes and we're going to pray? Are we prepared to talk about meditation? Are we prepared to talk about, Palo Santo and other things that we may need to incorporate and reference and recommend to our members to give them a little bit more peace?
I've been blessed recently to be really over almost the last 2 years to be a part of a project called Project Trust with the Reverend Dr. Floyd Hopkins. And so I think that's an excellent resource, something that you can tap into and connect people with. You're absolutely right. The needs for mental health support is not something that's going to be after, but it's now. So those I've been giving out and encouraging people to give out to, you're doing that virtual communication, put that number, put the suicide prevention number, put the mental health support number on your screen, and just to reference it, let folk know here's a place you can call. You will talk to someone who can give you some help and support immediately and connect you with someone locally. They're 24/7. They are divided in a number of ways in terms of diverse formats for communication, in terms of diverse cultural, ethnic, religious, spiritual needs. So I encourage people, and that's a resource, Denisha, you can share with everyone. All of those numbers about that are national numbers for mental health support. So to let our people have access to them by putting them on our Facebook Live, our YouTube, whatever you're doing, the Freedom School, everything else, add it to it as a resource. Make it natural and accessible, something that doesn't seem odd, unusual, or out of the ordinary. And that will go a long way. Just by affirming it, by frequently putting simple, accessible resources. They're for teenagers, there are text lines, there's web pages, there's blogs. There's just a plethora of sources. So I would encourage us to, as we're using these virtual formats, to include that information so that it just becomes a natural part of what we share, and understand that God is concerned about our mental health, and that it is not against a lack of faith or somehow or another a character flaw, that someone would need professional mental health support. In fact, it takes an enormous amount of courage to realize that and to get that help.
Nice. Pastor Quick, thank you, Reverend Donna, Doctor. Pastor Quick, up in your area, there was a little rumbling of the feathers, ruffling of the feathers with the commissioner who had made some comments around COVID, as if this is some self-selection stuff. You know, hey, it's going to be homeless people, it's going to be seniors, it's cool. Just let it happen. So you're doing work with the Democratic Party. You're a pastor that's chosen to get a little bit more political publicly. How has that been in terms of pulling back the sheets of what happens politically with folks that are business owners that sit in positions? To be a planning commissioner is major. That's not no little commission. That's the commission. You're making some serious deals and decisions. And so how has that been for you operating in that political space? And then also, what is your hope for how pastors and clergy, people of faith, can get more involved in the process, regardless of political party?
Well, I mean, that's just one. We just had another commissioner last week post on her Facebook page that
I need that.
I didn't know.
Our council member, Hakeem Brown, our lone African-American council member, she said that he was suffering from, I think it was good Negro syndrome or something like that. And yeah, I just wrote a letter. I just wrote a letter on behalf of our Democratic Club addressing that issue. And I quoted Martin Luther King, "Where do we go from here?"
How can we go?
And I think part of what's happening here, and I'm very interested in Dr. Porter's work as well. What's happening here is the acceptability of being in the house has tamed our prophetic notions. Getting elected to office is one thing, but once you get there, how not to stay co-opted is a critical piece. And, you know, I think we have to challenge, I heard you use the notion of white guilt earlier. I think we have to become okay with saying, I don't really care about their white guilt. I could care less about it. What I am interested in, and what I'm praying that this revival does for the church, particularly the Black church, is revive its radicality. There can be no compromise when your friends and your family are getting shot down in the street. I got to tell you, I have a 16-year-old son, and a day has not gone by where I haven't broken down and cried. I have, over the last 10 years, been in gyms at 2 or 3 in the morning with kids. Oakland's just adopted our program of late night basketball. But what I've realized is that those who would claim to be our friends do just enough to keep us from being angry. And so it's, let me feed you just enough to assuage your anger. And I think what this rioting is showing is that when we make deals behind closed doors, the people on the streets don't benefit from them. So I have called for the latest commissioner to be removed from her commission spot. Any organization that does not disavow her be removed from meeting in city facilities.
Wow.
And to have the city council go on record to repudiate her words. We've got to force public officials to go on record. And then we've got to start raising money to vote them out.
Come on, sir.
They do not fear you, they do not respect you. And I have always said, and I'm known for this here in Vallejo, I don't really care if you like me, but you will respect me. And I think far too often we confuse being Christian with being liked. God did not call me to be liked. God called us to a radical love. And God said, if you're not willing to risk your life, you have no life. So here in Vallejo, we are just a little short and have always just been a little short of the Klan. And when you cross the Carquinez Bridge, you go back 30 years in cultural history. And we have had for the last 20 years a group of play nice Black people who have gotten their crumbs while the majority of this community has struggled. And I am not interested in that. And I think one of the things that I would challenge us on as churches is when we get to the point where we need to be sustained by government, or we need to be sustained by nonprofits or whatever, we don't have the resources to be independent. So my number one effort here is to make sure that Friendship doesn't need anybody to give us a grant. I don't need anybody to pay my salary. And therefore, I can act a fool, because Howard Thurman says that a free Negro is the most dangerous thing on American soil. And I think we need pastors who are willing to risk being liked and start being loved by God.
You're going to make me do a Baptist fallout shout. Oh God, this is great.
Right. That was good. That was good. Dr. Quick, that was good. Pastor Porter, recently there was a young 14-year-old young boy. I'm trying to call him a young man, because working, as you all know, working with young people, they don't want to be called kids and boys when they're 14. So we try to say young people and young men. But that was a 14-year-old boy who was punched and assaulted by the officer. Thankfully, he lived to tell the story. I recently had on, maybe 2 weeks ago, a Dante Pointer from John Burris's office, attorney Dante Pointer, and he's representing the family in that matter. There's a lot of local outrage about what happens out in other states. Sometimes we miss and forget what's happening right in our backyard. What are some of the things happening throughout California? We've got the shooting that happened in Walmart in San Leandro. We have the other shooting of the gentleman in his driveway in Hayward. There's a lot of stuff happening in California. Our heart goes out to people outside of other states, but right here, we got some work we need to do right here.
Oh, most definitely. And honestly, the reason why I'm even in the position of where I am for the National Action Network is because of what just happened 50 yards from my church office that I'm in right now. If I go to my door and I look across the way, I will see the grandmother's house of Stefan Clark. And it was then that we got pulled into more of a civil rights activist role because of that incident, and that just happened right in our backyard. And I think you're so correct. We cannot overlook what's occurring within our own backyards. We have to say that Black Lives Matters, not just in Minneapolis, not just in New York, but here, even in Sacramento, we can't breathe. When we have a grown, police officer that got 200 pounds on a young boy and wants to beat him up over cigarettes, tobacco, things like that. We have to be mindful and say, hey, we have to stand up and take a stand against this injustice within our own cities and in our own localities. And so, we got to pay attention. I mean, you're exactly right. We have to pay attention to what's going on around us in our own neighborhoods. We have to start local before we go national. It makes no sense for us to be marching for George Floyd, God rest his soul, if we can't march for our own people in our own neighborhoods. And also, this also includes on the other side of my church. And right now, I'm building a $11 million charter school for kindergarten through 5th grade. And I'm partnering with a charter school system whose mission is to close the African American achievement gap for our babies, because education is so key. But on the other side of that, yeah, it's some housing areas where just last night, a young man, 23 years old, got shot sitting in his car. He was smoking weed, but he got shot sitting in his car and he died and stuff. And so, just as I had to pay attention to that, what happened 50 yards away from my office door, I had to go across the way. I just came from in there and visit with that family. They were with you, and we'll call that black on black crime. And we have to be just as concerned about what happens between us, our own locality, our own folks, as we are when and get as just as righteous man. You know, when someone that's not of our color, when racism occurs, when racial violence occurs upon our children, upon our own community. And so we have to take a stand all across the board and say we just can't have it anymore. Violence, all violence needs to stop. We need to stop killing each other, and we need to stop having people come in and start killing us.
You're right.
Denisha,
Yes.
Can I just say one thing about that, because I think it's critical. How we have a conversation about black on black crime, it is not different from white supremacy. Black on black crime is not separate from white supremacy. As a matter of fact, black on black crime is the child of white supremacy. And it is impregnated in poor communities. And so white supremacy, and I want us to be careful, because when we start talking to communities about our black on black crime, we have to ask what environment fosters it, what type of school system enables it. And we can go all the way back to the fictional letter from Willie Lynch, where the light slave is forced to hate the black slave and the house slave against the poor slave. And now it's been translated into your hood, my hood, this and that and the other. We can't let black on black crime ever be separated from the larger ethos of white supremacy and capitalism. You will not solve one until you get to the root of the other. And so I really want to, because we've had 2 shootings here in Vallejo, and we've had one of the worst school systems in the state. We hired a black woman to turn it around. When she turned it around, some of our white brothers and sisters said, "You're letting too many thugs stay in the classroom because you're not failing them out." That superintendent had to start a charter school for black and brown children.
Wow.
When the system is structured to create black on black crime, then we got to attack the system, not the victims. And I really want us, because that's a little understood nuance when we talk about our communities.
I would just like to add to that. I think it's a gentle language to say it's a little understood or misunderstood nuance. I think even the notion of framing something as black on black crime is a misnomer.
Yeah.
If you don't also frame white on white crime,
Right.
You don't. So I think that's such a helpful critique and opportunity for us to nuance our language around that. So thank you.
It's powerful and necessary. There are root causes and socioeconomic conditions, and it becomes a breeding ground for all of those things. And if we don't call it out, you're absolutely right. We'll separate it and say, well, you did it. It's your fault. And it's like, wait a minute. You set this structure up. You set this system up.
That's the language Trump wants to use around these protests, these riots.
Right.
And he wants to separate the rage. And I've gone back and I've been reading Black Rage again, written here in San Francisco. He wants to separate the rage of blackness from the rage of our rifle-toting white brothers and sisters that are storming state capitals, because whiteness is an immunity from dysfunction in the white mind.
That's right.
And we cannot allow them to stay immune because that immunity is what allowed crack to be a drug and narcotics now to be a disease, because it's hit the white community. So that the use of language and as Foucault would say, discourse, has played against us in real insidious and sinful ways. And that's why I think we have to be not only intellectually radical and challenge ourselves to change our language, but we've got to challenge a church that calls themselves evangelical when it's really capitalistic.
I like that. It's that capitalism side that I think we ignore a lot, because we get caught up in, and not to say that race doesn't deserve our attention, but we're missing the capitalistic moves that people are making, even those that look like us, and we're not calling it out because we are, we're missing it on that piece. I wanted to go to Pastor Jim for a second, just to talk about what's some of the action steps that Faith in Action is doing. Faith in Action, formerly known as PICO. I was really excited when you all, updated and changed your name. A little too close to Faith in the Bay, but shout out to the people at Faith in the Valley. But no, I love PICO and like the work that have always been a long supporter of the work that you all are doing. But you and Pastor Michael Wallace are co-chairing Faith in Action East Bay and doing amazing work there. Pastor Wallace is doing all kind of work in West Oakland and feeding on a regular basis. You've got solar on the roof at your church. Tell us some of the new things and proactive steps that we can do to work alongside Faith in Action, and what kind of upcoming political matters or letter writing campaigns might we be supporting?
Yeah, thank you. Faith in Action East Bay, formerly OCO, Oakland Community Organizations, related statewide to PICO, California, related nationally to the Faith in Action National Network. I'm co-chair with Pastor Michael Wallace of Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church in West Oakland. Our executive director is Dr. George Cummings of Amani Church here in Oakland. Doing lots of things. The big word in Faith in Action right now is belonging. Who do we belong to? And before we do anything, we need to belong to each other. And so we're stressing belonging circles and connecting and belonging. And how does belonging live itself out? And statewide, a big push is going to be in the fall on schools and community first, addressing the commercial property tax side of Proposition 13. Commercial property owners, because it doesn't turn over nearly as much as residential property owners. Disneyland ends up paying such minuscule property tax. Budweiser ends up paying such minuscule. So that's a statewide push for us. Locally, we're Ceasefire Oakland, part of Live Free. Yesterday, I was listening on Facebook, Ben McBride from Pico, California, talking about how are we going to address police violence. And we've got to bring the heat. And he's got a website, Bring the Heat, HEAT. We've got to talk about police, HEAT, H, hiring, E, equipment, A, accountability, T, training. All these things are so integral to policing and quality policing and community policing and nonviolent policing. We got to bring the heat and address these things at a very fundamental level. We continue to organize on in public education. When we sit with the young men at Ceasefire at the call-ins, these are the young men that the public education system has failed. And it is seamless and it's connected. So we continue to organize on public education. Of course, the state budget and money coming to schools in light of the economic crisis. That's a big fight and a big concern. So those are education, Live Free, schools and communities first, course, the immigration continues to be a major issue, immigration justice. So there's lots of things that we're organizing around.
Very nice. Thank you, Pastor Jim. Reverend Donna, Dr. Donna, tell us, what aren't you doing? Because you're teaching, you're leading, you're educating, you're training. Each of you are super busy in your own regard. But Dr. Donna, I think that you are you are just a rare gem. And so I think that in terms of this mental health piece, and I don't want to lose that, especially around folks. We didn't really get into COVID. But for folks that have medical mistrust, for folks that are experiencing helplessness and joblessness, right? And so if you already are weighted down by those things and afraid to get tested, it's a whole lot of challenge going on with that. But tell me some of the other things that you're working on right now, and how we can be supportive.
You know, believe it or not, what I'm working on right now is contributing to, because shaping the public narrative is a little presumptuous, but contributing to the public narrative about homelessness, such that homelessness is framed as a health care issue. So that we've had all this conversation around healthcare, and there seems to be a growing appreciation of healthcare as a right, as a human right. So how do we begin to add this understanding that being unhoused is a healthcare issue? And certainly COVID-19 has made that clear. And the sudden push and the pouring in of funds to make sure that those who might cause a rapid surge in the spreading of coronavirus suddenly can be housed is both an appropriate response and also a critique on a response that could have unfolded simply out of the principle that everyone has a right to be housed. And so that's part of what I'm working on now, just with an organization called All Home that's looking to end homelessness throughout the Bay Area. They're not confined to any one county, but they're working across county lines. And the vision is to end homelessness. And I'm excited about that. It's under the leadership of Tamika, and she's just doing a phenomenal job leading us in that fight. So that's where my energy is right now.
Love it. Final thoughts. We want to wrap up. I know I didn't give you a real ending time. I said 7-ish, but like a good church service, we took a few more minutes and got in a few more points. I didn't joke as much as I wanted to with each of you, but I really thought, Pastor Quick, this is for you. I thought you were going to come on with your Frederick Douglass. I've been watching the weekly services. I was like, this part is getting deeper on the side, but the governor then opened up the barbershops, and I see you got your fresh cut. So I'm like, wait a minute. I couldn't do my Frederick Douglass thing with you. So,
I was starting to have back problems from all the hair I was carrying, so I had to get rid of it.
I said, this is growing.
Really, I got peer pressured. I got bullied by my 16-year-old son, who was like, Dad,
I can't take that he's 16.
You gotta take me, and while you're there, you might as well hook yourself up. So
right. Yeah, that's how it usually goes. Wait
Yeah.
until he starts driving you there, though, on a regular basis.
He wants to start doing that now.
Yes, it's coming. It's coming. Final thoughts, everyone. I just want to give you an opportunity to close out. We've had a great amount of people that have been in the comment section. They all love you, and so you all have fans in here, and you've got a whole lot of quotes everybody is shouting out. Final thoughts for those that are watching and those who will watch the replay. What hope do you want to leave them with in terms of Jesus and justice?
I do want to leave that National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the 24/7 free and confidential support for people who are in a mental health crisis or are feeling distress, are having a difficulty dealing with shelter in place, or just a myriad of issues that could fall under distress and crisis and mental health. So I put it in the chat. I'm not sure if I put it the right way, but 1-800-273-8255. And I want to encourage my colleagues who are engaging in all of the various ways so impactfully and powerfully in their virtual ministries to include that information. Add it somewhere below where you put the place where you want people to give money.
Right. that part. Okay, so I know we're gonna do final thoughts. I asked
That's
someone.
my final thought. Thank
I
you.
asked someone, let me know, because I know you have an even better final thought. I asked someone last week with the amount of and the number I have on screen. So I want to leave it there for a second while I say this. How will we handle? We don't have to answer this. I just want to say it with all of you so I can see your faces. With congregations that are experiencing widespread unemployment, behind on rent, seeking renaissances, are we really going to go back into our congregations and lift up multiple offerings? Like, is that really going to be like everything is shifting for us, right? So it's not church normal. I think it's going to be very hard to be like, and now we've gotten to our offering portion. Get your best seed in your hand. If the best seed you have is literally the seeds in your cabinet. And so I'm not sure that we're thinking about those shifts as well as we're thinking about the physical, changes in how we're dealing with, online church. But when we come back, there's going to be a lot of back mortgage, back rent, back bills, and a lot of promise to pay that people are going to be trying to dig themselves out of the hole on. So I just wanted to get that out because I had that conversation with somebody, but that'll be a good conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Final thoughts. We'll start back up again at the top. Pastor Porter, give us your closing thoughts. Jesus and justice.
Well, Jesus and justice. Well, one thing that I've been preaching to our congregation, our community, also, okay, so my light keeps going off and on
because you're high tech. Because you're high
tech. As I'm waving.
You need a clapper. See, there was nothing wrong with the clapper.
It was a great idea when we first thought about it, save some money and all that stuff. Now, okay, so let me just put it out there. Anyways, what was I saying? Well, I preach to the congregation. Final thoughts, I'm letting people know that, listen, you control what you can control, and pray about the rest. You can't allow this time to stress you out. We are living in a time of uncertainty. And everything is uncertain. You don't know when we're going back, if we should go back or should stay or whatever. I'm erring on the side of caution and safety for our community. But in terms of, I love what Dr. Allen is saying about mental health. We cannot ignore that anymore. Our mental health. We cannot expect to go back to normal where we raising 3 or 4 offerings just because God says so and get a new car, a new home, or whatever. This is where we're going to have to really prove our worth to our people, relevant ministry. And so I think people will give to relevance and so into relevance. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I just want to leave you with that. We have to be our brothers and sisters keeper. The best way that we can help ourselves is by helping somebody else. And that's it.
Thank you, Pastor Porter. Pastor Jim.
Well, and talking about offerings, I was in a conversation the other day and someone said, the virus moves on surfaces. The offering plate is a surface. Do you want to be the 99th person to touch the offering plate? So the world's going to change. Look, justice wasn't just part of what Jesus was about. Jesus was justice. And Jesus proclaimed that the needs of the people are holy. And that proclamation is justice. The needs of the people are holy. Food and housing, jobs and education and medical care. That's what we're saying here. The ability to walk the streets safely, that's a need. Jesus taught that the needs of the people are holy, and we need to stay very close to that.
Thank you. Dr. Donna?
I'm so glad I'm not last. I don't have to follow Pastor Quick. I agree with what Pastor Jim just said. Jesus and justice, it could just as easily be Jesus is justice. And the call of the church in this season, I think in part is something that was said earlier, is a call to remind us that the faith we embody is a faith that embodies all of the ills in our community and brings to it a word of hope, a word of justice, a word of mercy, a word of inclusion. And so that's my closing thought, that this is who we are. We are people who are called to step into the crisis and bring calm by virtue of our faith, our hope, our trust in God. Offer our hands, our shoulders, our feet, our eyes, our mouths to be the instruments of justice. So Jesus is justice.
Love it. Love it. Final word, Dr. Quick.
Well, I have been telling Friendship, and I'll tell everybody else who will listen, the pandemic is a prophetic opportunity for the poor. I plan on coming out of this pandemic financially more successful than when I went into it, because now you have a stock market that if you have $4, you can buy a share of something. And we have to readjust our mindset, because Jesus always took them into a storm to teach them how to calm it. The God of justice says, I empower you to do greater than I've done. And so we have to empower our communities to see the opportunities in a pandemic and to walk through it and come out of it better. The beautiful thing about my gracious opportunity to pastor some of the poor is that they got nowhere to go but up. We're not losing middle class jobs. Our businesses aren't being closed. We were essential workers. My congregation is at Walmart and Costco and Target. They're doing the jobs nobody else wanted to do. So ironically, they're essential, so they're not unemployed. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to really do the research and to speak the narratives to the people who need them. And I'm excited about this opportunity, and I believe all of us are going to come out of COVID better than we went into it, because that's who our God is.
Amen. Amen.
Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time and being a part of this conversation. I think everyone that I invite week to week, I say the same thing. This will not be your last invitation. I hope that we can keep this line of communication going and open. I think the more that we dialogue with each other, beautiful things come from this, and relationships are deepened because of this. And the beauty of the Bay Area is not just in our cultural diversity, but also in the diversity of our faith traditions. And so we are as diverse in our faith traditions as we are culturally. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And the conversation is so rich and full when we get together. So have a wonderful weekend, and thank each of you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
So
And to each of you that's online, I just want to thank you for hanging in here with the conversation, and for all of your comments and for your feedback. If you're just joining the conversation late, feel free to go back and take a look at the replay, engage in the conversation, like and share this. And I hope that you were inspired and informed. Again, my name is Denisha DeLane. I'm the founder of Faith in the Bay. I really want to encourage you to check out faithinthebay.com and follow us online at Faith in the Bay if you are on social media, on Twitter or on Instagram. Thank you again so much for your support, and we will see you here again next Friday, 6 p.m.